Joining us in this episode is psychologist, author, and podcast host, Dr. Kelley. We're covering some essential territory today, from mentorship and mental health to the art of secure relating and managing relationships in today's world. For any of you curious about navigating the challenges of modern relationships or developing inner resilience, this episode will bring you a ton of insights. Anne brings a unique perspective on finding strength in our connections and managing the complexities of today's social culture. Let's jump in.
Well, welcome to episode 10.
Double digits. Yeah.
And if it's not 10, we'll go back and fix it in post. Welcome to Founding Up Uncharted, your sidekick for life, where we're talking about mentorship, especially for Gen Z and the rest of us who have experienced it and what our experiences have been. But before we get started, let's do our intros.
I'm Natalie Payton. I'm an actor, comedian, and podcast personality and co-host of Uncharted. Happy to be here.
You're happier after lunch.
I've eaten. I'm happy.
Very cheery.
I am Dr. Leon Vanstone, rocket scientist, storyteller, entrepreneur, co-host, co-founder, and many other things.
Wow. I'm Dan Dillard, also co-host of Uncharted and co-founder of Founding Up, mostly finance background and many other things as well. And today,
our super special
guest, and Kelley, you want to talk a little bit about what you do now, and then we'll dive into your past.
Well, just after those intros, comedian, rocket scientist. So I am a psychologist, author, educator, and podcaster myself.
Love it.
Personality.
What is the podcast for our audience to go look you up?
Our podcast is called Therapist Uncensored. So it is
very sweary.
Very. And so it's like, it's like basically we're freed. Being a psychologist my whole life, you're always held back, kind of restricted in what you can say, feeling like you have to be careful. But there's so many people out there that don't get a chance to get into a therapist office, right. Whether it's because they don't have finances or they don't believe in it or because socially it's not accepted. So we started the podcast about, so long ago now, 9-10 years ago, to kind of be able to get what we like to talk about out to the public. So
that's so cool.
It's kind of a similar theme of what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
It's mentorship. We feel like mentorship is one of those things that not everyone has access to until now. Mm-hmm. And, but it is one of those life-changing things that for many people. And we thought why not start talking about it, because it's not something that's just talked about all the time. So in a similar vein, getting that education out. So really, really love it. I was really impressed in our conversation. I can't wait till we get to that part about some of the things that you've written in your current book. You want to talk about the current book?
We'll start out there if you want.
Yeah, sure. Let's put it out there.
So it's entitled Secure Relating, Holding Your Own in an Insecure World. Mm-hmm. And it really kind of, we've been doing the podcast, like we said, like 10 years. We've been clinical practice. Actually, I do both a podcast and the book with my wife. Okay. And we love to do research, go to trainings about neuroscience, about attachment. And we've gotten for like 10 years to talk to some of the most interesting people. Y'all get that when you do podcasts, you get to call people up and say, hey, can I talk with you for an hour and a half about what you love most? And we've been doing that. And so we've taken all that information, kind of condensed it in our book. And it centers on getting away from the TikTok versions of how do you feel secure? How do you connect to people? What does attachment mean? And in our book, we bring like the science of it and we condense it, and we have a framework that helps you understand it and apply it in your everyday life. And we call it Insecure World. It's because it's, we have to find our own security in ourselves and in our relationships. But also right now, the world is really turned upside down. No surprise to anybody. So it's our pebble in the water to try to make a difference with that.
Love that. It is much needed. We talk about that. We just talked about that in our last show. Some of the insecurities and the anxieties that some of our, when we go out and do these interviews on site with some Gen Z, that comes up over and over and over. So super excited to lean more into that. But before we do that, I want to go back down this journey, which we always do in every show, as we bring a guest mentor on and kind of figure out where you were in when you were 10, 15 years old, what you wanted to be in life and what that looked like.
You know, a lot of people grew up with what they did want to be. And the funny thing is, I can remember my first career aspiration was what I didn't want to be.
Okay.
And I didn't want to be a psychologist. Bizarre.
So I became a psychologist.
Our family.
How'd that work out?
It worked out for me. Our family was just a mess of brothers that were really struggling. We went to family therapy. And this man, Tony, had to sit with my mom and the 5 kids in the room. And it was hard. And I left and I was like, Mom, what does he do? And she said, he's a psychologist. I was like, I will never do that.
Wow.
I remember that.
Wow.
What was your role in the family?
I was the youngest, so peacemaker.
Okay.
Came to my service, just like most of psychology, trying to fix yourselves. But I was a peacemaker.
Nice.
In the midst of the chaos.
Right.
The one that held the lightness and the let's get this all fixed, we'll be fine kind of thing. So
I'll say that in 22 interviews we've done, we have a first. Never have we had someone say, I didn't want to be this.
I knew exactly what I didn't want to
did not want to do.
And my favorite part of that story, of course, is then you became that. So
Exactly.
Right.
That's life.
Let's go down that journey. You didn't want to be. So then, high school, early college, what were the things that did attract you, and how did that journey go?
I think I got to know myself as I explored my career and started trying on things. Like I knew I wanted a career. I remember I was struggling in high school and doing well enough. And I remember going to the counselor's office and it was like the pre-counseling, like, what are you going to do? What college are you going to go to? And it shocked me because what she started to direct me towards was vocational. And I was like, I kind of thought of myself as like, and I left. I'm like, I'm the vocational kid, which was nothing bad. It's wonderful about that. But it kind of shocked my nervous system a little bit. And I think it was like I realized I hadn't put myself out about what I did want to do. So I did a lot of like exploring. Mm-hmm. I thought I wanted to be, now that I think about it, it's kind of funny. There's a lot about what I decided I didn't want to do to get to what I did. Yeah. Because then I thought when I first went to school that I wanted to be a physician. So I went to pre-med, like half the public goes to school. Mm-hmm. And then I volunteered at a hospital. I thought, let me go see what the sense is.
Right.
And 2 things hit me. I almost fainted when I watched a needle go in someone.
Yeah.
And then as I was doing this volunteer program, walking around, and I'm inside all day long. And I thought, I will shoot myself. I can't do this.
Yeah.
Right.
So I kept moving and moving and moving. Mm-hmm. And I'd say like the people that just would talk to me about what I loved more than anything really helped guide me in my life. Okay. For a little while, I wanted to be a physical therapist. I thought, then I'll be out of the office. And my mom said, it sounds like funny when I repeat it, but she said, Ann, I just already see you a little bit more of a chief than an Indian, which is so unpolitically correct now, but that was back then. Mm-hmm. And what she didn't mean is about me directing. It's just that I said, what do you mean? She goes like, you want to use your creative mind, and physical therapy is wonderful, but it's a lot of somebody gives you the prescription. Right. Mm-hmm. And I see you want to like analyze things. You can't help yourself. So it seems like that's important. And that was really a guiding force for me. So I think along the way, I kept trying different things and then realizing what inspired me, what invigorated me. Mm-hmm. And I just kept flowing with that.
Were there any points in that period where, you mentioned that the people that loved you were kind of, were some of those mentors? And what did they shine the light on that you were able to like shift? Well,
shining the light on really knowing yourself and like continuing to use who you are and what you're going to do, right? Like I love to be with people. I love to talk. I love to converse. So it was all those things. And then I love to work in systems. So that's what I did initially when I became a psychologist. And I didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to graduate school. It was unpredictable. But in between undergraduate and graduate, I'd done volunteer work. And I'd get out there and kind of play around with it. And the more I did that, the more I'm like, every time I go to this job, I love it. And every time I go to this job, I get bored. And so I just kept going that direction. And I would tell you, probably the biggest mentors were always my supervisors where I worked and helping me get to know myself, what my strengths. I waited tables for a long time, and then the volunteer works and things like that. And you get to talking to your supervisor. It's really interesting how many people guide you if you listen.
So true.
Do y'all find that in your lives? I feel like a lot of my supervisors ended up really providing a pivotal point.
Because they've just been a step ahead. And we talk about this. Leon built a rocket lab at UT. It was peer-to-peer mentorship. So even if it was a person that was 6 months, ahead of the last student, that was still a mentor relationship because they get at least show that experience. And I thought that was really interesting as well.
I think you're right. I think mentor to mentors probably been some of my most impactful experiences talking to my friends, or even getting into graduate school, which direction you're going to go, and just listening to people talk about their experiences and then trying it out and going to interview them, and love the people that are right ahead of you, and then take the time to say, okay, in my experience, I would or wouldn't do that. Getting into graduate school had to do with that because I had to really pull up the rear, and I had a few people guide me I wouldn't shoot for this program because that one's going to be hell to get into. Try this direction. And it just really kind of would flow that way.
That's true. That's why I like this new era of working remotely, because I can co-work with my friends who are in totally different industries.
Oh, yeah.
But we can cross-collaborate. What would you do in this situation? Because they're not so close to the work that I am, and they can guide me and help and open my eyes.
Yeah, give you another perspective.
Right.
I hadn't thought about that. That's really cool.
That is really cool.
So at what point then, so you're going through this journey and you're just trying to figure out what you don't want to do, then you get into grad school. At what point did you land right back into what you said you didn't want to do at 10 or 15?
I think my resistance to it, the challenge to it, started coming alive to me as I got older, did some of my own therapy, and I got what Tony was doing. Mm-hmm. And so I think as I learned to really appreciate what was happening out there, the more I wanted to be part of it. Yeah. I never wanted to be in clinical practice, and I didn't for 10 years. I worked with juveniles who had been incarcerated, and we did trauma work with them. And I kept thinking, I'm going to run a system of trying to do preventative work. So my passion's preventative work. I never thought I'd want to sit in an office because I always wanted to do prevention. And went for the juvenile justice system for a little while to kind of learn how that was going to help me in the future. And then met some of the most amazing youth and people that just inspired me along the way. So I just kept leaning that direction.
What was it about that experience? I'm just curious now. What was it about that experience? I mean, the inspiration, I kind of can put myself in your shoes, but not really. So I was wondering if you could share some of the things that inspired you to, because I could just imagine that feeling helpful to someone that is in need. And that's just as far as my imagination goes.
That's a good way to put it. And it was feeling the complexity of things. When you go into a system and you can see how many parts are not talking to one another. Right. And you think the problem's right here. You've got this kid and he has a problem, and you're going to get in there and you're going to work with this kid, and you start realizing this kid has a problem because the system's really screwing him over and not attending to him. And you think, wait, I could sit here and complain, or
be part of the change.
I could start being part of it. So then I moved up in the system, started directing it, and just kept kind of going in that direction, which has continued with why we wrote the book and did the podcast. It's I didn't want to just be somebody that was just complaining about the systems.
Right.
And then I would find myself around the people, you know, when you're in work, you can be around people who are just kind of disgruntled, and their energy is focused on being disgruntled. Mm-hmm. And then you're around those people that go to lunch and their energy is, this really sucks, but you know what we could do?
Right.
The more people I was with that had that kind of energy, that's who I gravitated towards. And those were the people that were doing systems work and doing graduate school. It's like, let's go see if we can have an effect. And that's really motivating for me. I like the idea of having hope and the desire for change and meeting people who want that and don't just lean into this sucks and will always suck.
Yeah.
So I can think of lots of people in my life, best friends, supervisors, who were, if I would come and bring an issue, they would turn it back to me and say, well, what do you think? And not everybody supervises that way.
Right.
Some people supervise with just trying to manage the complaints. I had a lot of supervisors that would say, what do you think? Why don't you form a committee?
Right.
And it would give me agency to say, hey, I could have an effect because I don't just have to sit here and complain, and somebody trusts me enough to say, go form a committee. And I think, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of us, we go on feeling like we're the imposter most of the time. Like, I don't belong in this committee. Why am I running this committee? I don't know what I'm talking about. But you get a bunch of group thinking together, and all of a sudden you're like making change. And then it's like, hey, this feels pretty good. I'm going to keep going.
Right.
And then it keeps seeking people out that are inspired that way.
Yeah. What's coming to me though, it sounds like, I mean, you're in here, I was like, I'm a psychologist, this and that, but it sounds like entrepreneurial. I had the word entrepreneurial in front of that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because everything that you're saying is like so many other entrepreneurs that I've interviewed that literally look at the systematic problem and say, how do we fix this? And you find joy in some of the rewards, but also it's this, how do we make this more efficient, make it better?
I love that you say that because for a while, my little graduate psychology self saw entrepreneurship and money as evil. And like, if I did anything, like I just have to do it and I didn't understand what business was and how powerfully important entrepreneurship is and how much it enlivens people to change their circumstance. And I had some people in my life, I think who really taught me how to get inspired like that to create something and to see, hey, I can really help create wealth for other people by creating systems. It helped me shift my gear away from some kind of belief that if I did that, I was somehow participating in the negative system. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, it does. Well, and that's part of the premise of the show is that, in my view, we are, my background in finance, dealt with hundreds of families with their finances and helped them figure out retirement, figure out saving for college, all of these things. But what I got to see is it's almost like this box everybody gets put in, right?
Yeah.
And this is the peer pressure. This is the system. This is the way it's supposed to be. And at some point, when I shifted from that to building the magazine and interviewing all these entrepreneurs, I got to see where mentorship plays a big role, because mentors are the ones that kind of do what Natalie just described as this peer person that says, hey, but look at it this way. And it kind of opens up from that box to the rest of the world. We had one of our guest mentors that came on the show described it as being on top of a mountain instead of down in the middle of the city. You're able to get on top of the mountain and kind of see the bigger picture. And so, definitely kind of that's the shift that I witnessed. And I think Leon saw the same thing when he was building. He built, as I mentioned, this rocket lab at UT, had 250 students there. And he just kind of saw, by having outcome-based thinking and people mentoring each other, how these 18-year-olds were hot firing rockets, right? And it was just this incredible learning journey for themselves. And they were able to learn more about themselves and who they were through this a mentorship program. So
I think that's so exciting.
So what you described there, totally makes sense as far as being able to, you're thinking one way, but then your experiences have led you to start thinking differently.
Was it almost like you couldn't understand that helping others and making money doing it was okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There was something about, even as a psychologist, like somebody comes to my office, they need help, and then I charge them money for it.
Right.
It feels just wrong. It just feels like you're supposed to be out there just giving, and the idea of taking while you give, the reciprocity, right? It was an odd thing for me to learn. And I had mentors. I know one of my coworkers, Bob Motes, when he was teaching me, like, oh no, you're going to need to go up on your fees. And I'm like, how can I do that? That just seems impossible. And if you don't teach people through your actions about how to ask for what they need and how to do it in a respectful and honoring way, then how do you anticipate helping them learn to do it?
And knowing your worth and representing that for your clients or patients.
Right. And then you can use the money for all sorts of different things in your ways.
Right.
And then that's why we created the podcast. There's no money involved in the podcast. People can just hear it and listen. So it's another way to give. So those that could afford to come would come. And I felt deep connection and do feel deep connection and grateful that that gave me the opportunity to have what I had.
Right.
But I had to learn to do it without guilt. Like it is okay to have this transition, this engagement with one another. But it was a learning process because I was really caught in that that's just wrong. And I think had I not had mentors in my life teaching me entrepreneurship, he literally taught me how to create a business in a way that felt good eventually. And then I was able to really recreate it in a lot of different formats that I think has been very inspiring for me.
Well, it's easy to and you can see it in social media and other places where there's all these complaints. It's easy to talk about something that you don't understand. So entrepreneurship and maybe these guys, these billionaires making all this money, and it's just really easy to get negative on that. But going through the grind of starting a company and going through the grind of providing the value, you look at what just Jeff Bezos has done, right, and creating Amazon, and how it's. I was talking to my dad the other day. He wanted me to order him some coffee, and I was on the road out. He lives an hour away. I was on the road out there when I ordered it, and I got there and I worked with him for about an hour, and the coffee shows up, and I'm like, I love Amazon because this is true value. Like, it saved me time from doing that. But in the startup world, the hours, and we're going through it in our startup, the hours, the amount of effort it takes to go from 0 to 1, it is a ton of work, and you have to choose to do that. Nobody's telling you to do that.
Right.
You have to choose to go change the system. You see something that's broken, that's not right, and nobody's giving you permission. You're like, well, I'm going to go build something, and if it works, it works, but it's a lot of risk. So I see, based on what you're describing and kind of some of the reservations about money and entrepreneurship and all that, but then you see the other side of that coin, and you see about all the work and the value that goes into building something, and then it's the market that says it's valuable because they showed up and said, yes, what you've created was something that I want to buy. So
right, and it's only going to make it if it's out there because somebody needs it and wants it. It really highlights too, like having to look at. We can get so blocked by our own assumptions and the way we were taught in the world. And I think I had this having a single mom who was always poor, I think I had this limiting thing and to be able to kind of expand that to say, wait, I can get out there. The word we use a lot is agency. Like by helping people know you have agency to like, oh, I can fix a problem, make a difference, and help people along the way. It's not an either or. But I had to also check out my assumptions about what blocks were coming in, what judgments I was having. And I think that would be another side of mentorship, obviously coming as a psychologist, that is so important, is like people out there that are your friends and coworkers that challenge you on certain dynamics you have. You have an opportunity to learn or to just feel criticized.
Right.
So true.
And I think it's that mentorship, like, people going, why would you do that? That just, stop and think, where does that come from? And actually asking, well, where does that come from, can really be a pivotal change.
Especially when you look inwards.
Yes. Where did that assumption come from? What am I holding? That's a lot about what our book's about it, but what are we holding inside that is a limiting belief that could be based on our own family history, but it's also based on the system we're raised in and the system we're trying to change. And so we have all these assumptions and fears, and people help us question that, and we have to be open to it. Like your friends kind of going, wait, why are you stopping there?
Right.
It's another way of receiving mentorship is like, what are your limiting beliefs?
One of the things that I want to make sure we have time to talk about is, we were talking about a little earlier, this kind of culture that we're in today, and where technology has taken us today, and I want you to expand on it a little bit more because I know I'm going to fumble it. But essentially, the gist of it is this cancel culture, not necessarily cancel, but also like block and just I'm going to, people are more of a commodity than a community. How would you describe? I know you were describing it to me a little bit differently, but I actually want to touch on that.
Well, one of the things that can help us live to our best selves, like we think of your nervous system as having kind of two primary goals in the world, and that is to keep you safe and to help you connect with other people. We need both, right? We come to this world, if we don't have connection, we're going to die. And our body knows that. And so we learn how to read people and how to connect in order to survive. And the reason I drop into that is knowing the difference between when we are in our protection system and when we're open and in our connection system is probably the most important thing to be able to realize. And the more we feel threat and our amygdala gets activated, the cortisol starts running through our body, certain parts of our mind, basically, if you were going to see it on an fMRI, kind of quit lighting up and other areas light up really intensely. And when we're in threat, the parts that protect us are what lights up. And so we really can't connect to one another. We can't feel safe. We can't feel warm. We can't be curious. If we're threatened, we're not curious. If we're threatened, we're not open to anybody else because we just have to survive. And it activates all of that part that helps us be self-centered. I'm not going to be thinking about anybody else. If I hear a loud noise, I'm just running, right? And then when we feel safe and open, this other part of our body, our connection system, our oxytocin, the thing that makes us want to talk and make eye contact, is activated. And it's what brings us together. And right now with technology and with the tension that we have around us, there's things that kind of keep us chronically. And I think Gen Z, and this is what you and I were talking about, probably more than any other generation thus far, has had more to their nervous system activation that is different, that keeps them in this state of, I don't feel safe. And then there's things in social media, et cetera, that promotes that doesn't promote, oh, if I get on and I meet you and I'm going to sit and have a conversation with you, this is going to feel really good and I'm going to feel really warm. And instead, I'm conversing through text and you could ghost me at any minute. And the worst thing is, if I can say something stupid, if I meet you on a dating thing and I say something, I'm not funny and I'm not witty, and all of a sudden you quit talking to me. It's just ghosted. That didn't used to happen to us. We might start to realize we were losing favor with our joke, or you know what I mean? But now there can be such quick cutoffs. We have a big part of cancel culture right now, which says, if you do something or say something wrong, then I have the right to, basically, I have to cut you off, or somehow it reflects on me. Well, what that's promoting is disconnect and fear. So then we live in this part that not only is more guarded, but is also not feeling the connection that you would feel. You don't get to experience it in your body. And the sad thing is, the more we do that it's just like anything else. You use it or you lose it. So if we're not using our connection centers, we're connecting with eye contact through voice, and instead we're doing it all on text, that part of our mind starts to atrophy. Does that make sense? Like, it's a long answer to a very...
No, it's exactly where I wanted us to go, because it's an important thing. The other thing that comes to mind is it doesn't allow you to train to overcome. Overcome objection, like, communication is difficult, but learning to communicate, and it's this process, it's like anything else, learning the quirks of another individual and where you see eye to eye and where you don't, and how to still come to an agreement, or how to navigate those waters, is an important skill. And if we just say we don't want that skill because we can just cancel and go, you're just missing out on that. And that's going to be something that I find that if you don't learn that lesson at one point, that lesson is going to come back over and over and over until you actually do learn it. It's just this game of life. It's like, at least for me, it's like, if I don't learn the lesson, it's going to come back. And so that's the thing. If you don't learn it in your
It's so
dailies
true.
with your friends and how to overcome and how to be in community, and part of being in community is navigating those kind of waters and still coming out with a positive result, hopefully, or at least learning more about yourself and how you interact. But if you just choose to ghost.
Yeah. Just if you ghost, something made me feel uncomfortable. Why do I have to? I shouldn't. I mean, there's a lot of positives now. I can have a voice and like not have to tolerate you if you've offended me. I mean, I see the positives on some level, but you're right. If we don't practice, one of the things we're learning as a culture is that if we feel discomfort, we should act on it. And that means we need to stop the discomfort right now. And that is not what life's about, nor is relationships. Like, it's our ability to tolerate discomfort is probably the muscle we need the most right now. And instead, if somebody makes us feel uncomfortable, we feel the activation in our body. So we think we have to act on it. So now I need to cut you off, or I need to speak louder and cut, one way or the other.
Or yell and then cut you off.
Yeah. And so
causes divisiveness.
you don't tolerate it. Like one of the questions I was asked by some Gen Zers was surprising. It's like, what are the red flags to relationships? And that you should just cut off. And I said, well, there certainly are, and they're different for different people. But I would invite us to think about red flags as being something that is something to explore, to be curious about first. And they had never, they basically talk about their dating, that they see these signs and then they just cut the person off. And I'm like, but how do you know that activating you might not be the very thing you need to be challenged on? Like, if what you feel is a discomfort you cut off, how do you grow? How do you kind of learn to tolerate and connect on differences? And instead, you don't connect on differences, you disconnect from differences. And then, strangely, you're bored in relationships, right? Like, it's like we have to have that ebb and flow. And like you were saying, the muscle of working through hard things. But I think even more impactfully is for us to feel secure in the world, secure in ourselves. We have to also have the belief that people will stay when we are our worst, most stupid, most inarticulate, the least funny selves sometimes.
Right.
And if we don't have that ability to know, oh, even if I say something stupid, you're still going to stay with me, then I can't relax and be my authentic self.
Right.
Because I'm always needing to perform. And here's the hardest part for Gen Zers, and I see this a lot. They're thinking much more about how they're coming across than what their body's experiencing. And so so a lot of times people report to me they have a hard time feeling what they feel. And it's because we have to go inside ourselves. And as I was mentioning before, if you're activated in fear, you can't actually go inside yourself. So it's kind of a rock and a hard place. For me to get to know you guys better, I need to be calm enough to be able to feel myself and go inside and go, oh, I feel warm with you, or I don't. But if I'm preoccupied with what you think of me, I can't even go deeply into that feeling of how I feel with you or how I feel in life. And so I think I see a lot of that in Gen Zers. Like, I don't know how I feel, and it's hard for me to make decisions. And I think we kind of keep ourselves in a suspension of, what do you think of me? Now I know whether I'm okay.
Right.
Do y'all see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why when you and I were talking, it was just like ringing in my ears. So my experiences, I've mentioned on the show, I've got a 21-year-old, and obviously in those experiences, I see that in her interaction with friends. And how do you overcome some of these challenges, and rather than just cut people off? And you said it earlier, psychological safety, right? I feel like if you don't have enough, what you said is, I can be myself and authentic and know that you're going to accept me for who I am. If I make a mistake, we're all imperfect. If I say something wrong, you're going to be okay with that and be able to shine that mirror at me and help me become better. So we're almost helping each other become better. But if
challenging you,
exactly.
right? Like coming back and challenging you rather than cutting you off.
Right.
Staying in the conversation rather than getting.
Yeah. But if you cut me off, then I'm like, what did I do? What did I say? And now I'm afraid to establish a relationship with someone else. And it just becomes this vicious circle. And you'll end up having to, again, come out of that and face it again at some point. But yeah, so that's why I was really keen on trying to bring that back in the show, because I thought that was such a really good point. And you talk about that in your book. Is that
Yeah, we talk a lot about that in the book, about how to find security in the face of that, how to kind of go inside yourself and then be aware. Of course, I mean, we're all going to care what other people think. If you don't, you have a bigger problem. You know what I mean? If you don't care what anybody else thinks, that's a problem. But so we want to care, but we also want to care what we think and how we feel. And, honestly, the Gen Zers have so much going right, so much better than our generation too, because like who they are sexually, they can speak about what they want. There's so many positive things where they're finding their own voice. There's differences more, right? They don't need the same color skin next to them. And I think Gen Zers also are, in some ways, in my opinion, finding themselves in the world in a different way.
They were really sort of thrust, I think, to the top of that needs pyramid.
For sure.
Very, very early, right? Because it's like, look, it's questionable, I think, if the job market really needs everyone in it that we have already, let alone all of the other Gen Z that are coming through school. And you're seeing it. It's just tough as a Gen Z person, right? When you have other, people in front of you that have just by virtue of their age have had more life experience, and you're trying to get a job. And so we're just really struggling with that. And so when I as a society don't have this expectation pulling you out of high school and into a job to be a plumber or electrician or whatever, right? A rocket scientist, a psychologist, when I'm like, hey, do whatever you want, because like, we're already kind of trying to figure it out, right? We're trying to figure it out already just with the people we've got. So just do whatever you want, right? Okay, but then what do I want? Like that.
So
now
true.
It's me. I get to, whereas before you're like, you need to go be a mechanic because we need mechanics. So just go. There's the career, right? Like talking to my father, who's like, well, yeah, I knew I needed to come out of school and get a trade job because my grandmother needed help paying for the rest of his siblings. So that was it. And that was a strong connection then to his community. And he understood how he was playing his part. His value, right? Like no small part of that job was so that he could then give money back to my grandmother, his mother, and support his siblings. Whereas today, I wasn't putting food at 18 into the mouths of, I was getting beer money, and for our listeners, the age of drinking in England is 18, just before you were worried too much. But so,
no, I agree with everything you just said.
And I think that we really, and that's a great blessing.
Yes.
Because my grandfather went through his whole life. I don't think he ever thought about who he was as a person or what he really wanted. He just was worried about keeping food on that table for his 6 children, which boggles my mind. But
it gave him meaning and purpose.
Yeah, it did give him meaning and purpose.
He didn't have to angst, who am I?
No, he was a father. He was a provider.
That was who you were, right?
He carried sacks of flour.
And you didn't have so many choices.
No, you didn't.
Like, right. How are you going to go this direction or that direction?
And so on the one hand, it's such a blessing to be able to have, for everyone, it's very democratizing for one of the first few times, I think, in society that even the poorest get to say, who do I want to be? But it's also really hard because a generation, we haven't answered that question. I don't think millennials as a generation kind of figured that out yet. It may be that it's Gen Z is the one that, like, okay, the who am I? Because they're the ones that really, I think, broke the dam on mental health, talking about millennials were better, but Gen Z are much better, much more forward about mental health. They talk about mental health the way we talk about normal medicine.
Oh, that's true.
Got a bad back, I need something. That's nothing to be ashamed of, right? Oh, yeah, well, I've got ADHD and da-da-da. My father, you could not have, if he had some, you didn't talk about mental health. You didn't go to a psychiatrist unless you were insane. Whereas
no, you wouldn't have admitted it.
No, you would never have told me you were sick. Yeah. You only went to the psychiatrist because you were insane. Whereas like, I only go to the doctor when I'm dying. You're like, no, you go for a yearly checkup.
Right.
So I don't know. That was a lot of what you said there really kind of resonated, I think.
Well, I think part of what you're saying too is like when we have agency and we have a sense of value, it brings clarity. And when you don't know what your value is going to be. Like you said, we're not going to need all the workers. So you don't have this And I think Gen Z's also done a wonderful job in a way with COVID help breaking us free from who you are is what you do, which is all in the Western culture, right? You are what you do.
You go up to someone at a party, what do you do?
Yeah, that's exactly. What do you do? And
or
then
in college. What was your major?
Yeah, right. What's your major?
Let's put that in the hierarchy of who we think you are and all the schemas of who you are. And they don't do that. They don't have to believe what they do is their identity, which is a beautiful shift. But I think they are at a tough place because they're the one making that turn. And like you said, I mean, the funny thing about research on choice is that we like having choices. Choices are wonderful. And it makes us feel like we have agency. But when we have too many choices, we're never satisfied.
Paralyzing.
This is the Netflix conundrum, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like you go in, you go in to get olive oil, and you have three choices. You go to Fresh Plus down the street. You have three choices. You're going to walk out and you say, how happy are you with that olive oil choice? Extremely. You send somebody in an olive oil store or in a whole aisle, and they go and they leave with their olive oil. Unless they're experts, they're going to, how do you feel? I don't know. Like, and it's full of angst and uncertainty.
Sure.
Right.
So they have all these choices, and with AI and all the world is changing, it's like too many factors to incorporate. And then when you can't really decide what inspires you, that's the other thing. It's like the thing I was mentioning earlier is that when you've been trained to look outside a lot, it's really hard to feel your own passions because you've got so many things that will fill the free moments.
Right.
You know, the addictiveness of the, we all know of the phone, click, 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 click. And so that there's not that, you don't stay in uncertainty and angst in your own body enough to tune into it to help kind of resolve it. You feel it, and then you have short-term solutions to it. But those are addictive, and it keeps you from going deeper in that angst of who am I? And then with all the choices, it's a tough, our choices are definitely, like you said, not clear. And it makes it angst-worthy.
Yeah, that analogy about the olive oil store, it makes a lot of sense, especially with how much choice Gen Z has. Because then, it's the angst. Did I make the right choice? Is that the right thing?
Even at a restaurant, I don't know what I want because there's so many options.
There's so many options, and then if I didn't get this, the whole thing is like there's so many options, but you can always get a better option,
right?
If you keep clicking,
right?
Which inherently, then, if you can give back, if you give somebody a piece of art, and you say how much do you value it, they're going to say love it because you got it for free and you love it. You give them the same choice, the same three pieces, they pick it and you say, what do you think of it? But you can give it back if you don't like it. They don't like it as much. The feeling that you can give something back and something better is around the corner keeps you from liking what you have. Wow. So think about dating when you have an endless amount of dating apps and you think
there's always another person.
There's always another person. And did I stop before the next one? That could have been.
Was the next one, was that the one?
We didn't have all those choices. At least I didn't. Right. It's like, who did you meet sitting next to you was your big.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At the bar.
At the bar.
Where, ladies and gentlemen, me and Dan met for the first time. Another thing I really liked about what you were saying, which I thought was interesting, was your point on diversity. Because Gen Z are a very, diversity forward generation. And it is interesting, though, because diversity at the end of the day, I think, is diversity of experience. And that comes in many different forms and everything else, right? And then you want that. You want diversity of experience because that helps to broaden your worldview. That helps you to learn from each other, from people with different expectations of the world and different assumptions of the world and different experiences in the world, right? It is enriching. But to your point, if you start cutting people off that you find offensive or even just as you say, right, if the conversation just isn't quite going the way you want it to on a dating app or something, right? And you're like, okay, I'm done with this. There's, like you said, there's another, I've got a laundry list of people to get through. You say one thing and okay, you're out next.
Well, you say this, it means that you interpret. You say this, so this means this about you.
Right, and you're out.
Yeah, you're out.
But it what it does is it means everyone around you is just like you.
Yes.
Right, instantly, right? By an immediate self-selection, there are no awkward moments. You unselected for them, right? But then how are you going to grow?
Exactly.
All of the growth periods in my life have been some of the hardest. It's what motivates you to change. If I'm in a nice place, there's beer on tap, pizza comes whenever I ring the bell, all of the movies and the TV are great, I'm not leaving.
That's exactly true, yeah.
If the room catches fire, okay, we're out, let's go, right? And so it's an interesting one for a generation that's so diversity forward. And I have seen them in my experience with undergrads at UT, I had watched them do this in certain groups. They will self-select for groups that look diverse, just looking at them, but they're all the same.
Yes.
Like they're all the top 10% students from middle class, sort of upwardly mobile families. They have quite similar experiences in life, and they kind of group up like that. And
Absolutely.
they weren't actually, some of them, that diverse, and they didn't like the people that were, it was the conservatives and other people that had these different experiences, and they didn't want them in those groups. And I thought that was very interesting, to observe, because I'm like, you look different, but you kind of all think the same.
Yeah, we do. We self-select and what brings us comfortable. And I can comfortability, and I can relate to that. Like and I've really challenged myself more and more and more in the last 3 or 4 years, how much I would select out based on political view. You had a certain political view, no interest in talking to you. And yet the more we do that, the more we're not having the deep conversations. And then you get your own group and you think we're the right ones and they're the wrong ones.
Right.
And the funny thing is, the sign, when I was mentioning that we have to know our telltale signs, whether we're in our protection system versus our connection system. One of the telltale signs that you're in your protection system, so you're not fully integrated in your mind, is that you think your position's always right.
Yeah.
Like you think you're right and the other people are wrong. It's actually a sign of insecurity.
Right.
Because when we're in our secure selves, we have some complexity to know, I think I have a really good point, but I think I also don't know the whole world runs. And so the idea of having multiple views around you, you have to be able to tolerate that in order to have your views questioned. And the more we don't, like, think about all the mentoring we get from people challenging us. But if we self-select that out because they make us feel uncomfortable, or they say something about me, there's so much in the cancel culture. If I don't cancel you, then it means this about me.
Right.
I've watched my 20-year-olds where they're around, like, if they didn't cancel somebody, they get canceled. Right. And so there's this
canceled by association.
Canceled by association. And that is probably what I see a shift in that. And I'm really, really appreciative to that. And there's a professor out of Smith College, Loretta Ross, that she is amazing. But she talks about calling out the cancel culture.
Right.
And I'm really glad for that, because it's making us too homogenized. If we don't have another sign that you're in your connection place, is that if you have curiosity and you can tolerate curiosity. Curiosity involves tolerance, because I have to move out of my knowing to be curious about you. And if we just surround ourselves with all these people that think like us, even though they look different, then we get to walk around smug a little bit. And I'm going to add one last thing to that. And that, I think, is Gen Zers have a lot of shame internalized about what they have, especially if they come from any level of privilege. And they don't know what to do with that. They've heard in school how much they have and other people don't. If they take, other people lose. And there's really important perspectives to give, but we haven't helped them learn what to do with that. And so they carry a lot of shame. And the way to get out of feeling shame is to feel self-righteous and right, and to cut people off who are wrong. And I think the more we all move into being able to handle our own shame for our privileges and stuff, and be able to tolerate differences, I think we work through that. And we are able to not live by hiding that in us, by being so self-righteous. And we don't have to cut people off. Like, I have to cut you off because if you don't, if I don't through association, but it's also because then I feel really bad about who I am, and I can't do that. So I have to cut you off and distance from you. And if we can, like, realize we've probably all said or done something very similar.
Right.
Oh, if you held me to account for every incredibly stupid thing I've ever said in my life,
can you imagine?
As an 18-year-old kid, God, like
so.
And as
true.
Gen Z, it's always on the record.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? So that's the problem. Like
forever.
There was this interesting study on Gen Z is the first generation for quite some time where their alcohol consumption has gone down.
Oh yeah.
And there are many factors driving that. But one of the ones that was put forward I just thought was interesting was that if you get drunk at a party now, that gets recorded.
Yeah.
If you get drunk and throw up on yourself or something,
or you're
right?
passed out on the ground.
Passed out on the ground, or whatever it is, right?
And that's the first thing people do.
Before it was a joke.
First thing people do.
It was a joke. Everyone laughs at you the next day at school or something, whatever. And
you get Sharpie on your face or something.
A week later, everyone's forgotten it happens and no one cares. Now, it's not only is it recorded, it's on the internet forever. So in 30 years,
I hadn't thought of that.
When you go to get a job and someone searches your name to do a bit of diligence on this new employee and boom, that comes this video. Right? Like, man, when everything's on the record, because I am a very different person to the person I was 5 years ago, 5 years before that, and so on.
And you want that freedom to know that you're going to continue to grow and become and expand.
And learn to be challenged instead of cut off.
Yeah.
And
not be shamed for who you were for the rest of your life.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I have a young son, a 2-year-old son, and I think, how do I create a safe environment in where it's safe for him to fail? And I thought the same thing with the Rocket Lab, in some literal senses, but also metaphorically. How do I create a safe space where these kids can fail, either by blowing things up, but also, there's still a lot of interpersonal relationships they have to manage, and you have to get ready for the workforce, and that will involve conflict and people criticizing you and your designs, everything else. But really, that never goes away. Even as an adult, you need to create safe spaces where we can all fail and then, dust ourselves off, pick yourself back up. All right, that was a bad choice. I'm going to salvage my life experience from that as I can. And I'm, going to go on to the next thing. Just as with my son, when he falls on his face, we dust ourselves off and we pick ourselves up. And now if he falls on his face, most of the time he doesn't cry, he gets up, he dusts his trousers off and he keeps going. But
he's expecting that he's going to fall and it's going to be okay.
Right.
And he can sing a song about it afterwards.
And I think that's the piece that cancel culture misses in some sense. It's absolutely right to call someone out that's perhaps behaving inappropriately, but to then just delete them from existence.
Right.
And not say, no, you need to do better. I'm going to hold you to a higher standard.
Well, and we should call this for what it is. It's peer pressure, right?
Right.
It's like, cancel these terms, cancel culture, but it really amounts to peer pressure and bullying, right? Because you're really bullying someone out of existence because we're all...
And in fairness, it's not new.
Right.
I mean, I remember when America canceled French fries. Remember that?
Yes.
Freedom fries, remember? Because France wouldn't go to war.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. That was
it's
one
true.
of the first cancel cultures.
Cancel culture is to try to control. But if you think about it, it is bullying. I agree. And why do we bully? We bully...
because we don't feel safe.
Right. You don't bully. You don't have a need to stand over somebody unless you have shame and fear. And that's my point with the shame. It's like, I'm going to cancel you because you've done something instead of deal with the fact I've got a long list inside of me that I would die if somebody found out. So I'm going to get more self-righteous and point over there where if you're just like, oh my gosh, some of those most important points where you've screwed up has changed you. And hopefully along the way, you had people where you could talk to and they were like, and you could admit, God, I did this. And they're like, oh my God, that's awful. I've done that too. Yeah. And then you can then
relate
we join.
And grow. Yeah.
I've done that too. And I'm not saying good for you. I'm like, God, I've done that too.
Yeah, that was dumb.
Yeah.
We were dumb, weren't we?
Weren't we? But then it's like, oh, we're both human.
Right.
And honestly, that inspires us to be our better self.
Right.
The shame and the call out, it just inspires you to live in fear. And the more we live in fear, again, if we live in fear, we're not in connection. So we're not helping those other individuals by calling people out. And I just had a wonderful conversation with Pam Benson Owens. I don't know if you know her, but she is over there and runs Six Square. But one of the things she talked about is when some of her friends try to help her if somebody's racist against her and they start calling them out. She goes, that doesn't help me. What do you think you're doing? You're not helping me.
Right.
If you are coming out and on my behalf, being shaming of other people. Hold your own. Don't do that, right? Like, and what she was pointing out is we're shaming other people for saying something racist because we're not dealing with our own racist biases, you know? And so I really appreciated hearing from her. Don't think you're helping me because you're standing there shaming somebody else for being racist.
Right.
Yes, call them out, challenge them, encourage them, but invite them into a different place.
Into a dialogue.
That helps me. Don't shame them for me. And I thought it was a really powerful message that she sent.
Yeah. Wow, what an episode. I think we're out of time. We're there. We didn't even get to our questions, and that's okay.
Are you sure? Sorry about that.
We got to our book. Look, we should show.
I think we're just going
anyone who
to have
doesn't
a part 2 with Ann Kelley.
Okay, sounds good.
For anyone, here you go. Here's the book.
Thank you.
Secure relating. I love the colors.
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
I definitely would love to have you back. So I think there was so much here that Gen Z needs to we all need to hear, right? But especially Gen Z as they're facing, as you were saying, some of these things that they made so much sense. And you, Leon, where you were talking about the various, I guess it was in all the conversation, but essentially feeling special. I think one of the things that I recall as a kid, mom always made you feel really special, right? Yeah. And that has gone away. If we're all a commodity now. Now, if you can just swipe, and you're the next thing.
Right.
It's where's the special star that's inside each and every one of us? And I still believe every one of us has this gift that we can show to the world. But if we allow technology and just our systems to make us feel like a commodity, then we will become that. So the idea is, let's not do that. Let's be that special star. And we'll end this episode with that special star statement.
But I love that, because what you're doing is tune in, like we keep talking about what's happening, but tuning into your uniqueness. And it's okay if you're shifting and different in somebody, and helping each other stand out as different and not having to conform. Yeah. Let your people, and you know, it's so hard for sometimes them to let people know that they're special. It's like this feeling like it's vulnerable to tell somebody else they're special. You know?
I like that. Let's challenge the audience.
I like it.
Tell someone they're special today.
They're special today. Leon, I think you're very special.
I have heard that feedback before. Not always in such a positive light.
Not always in a positive. Me too.
But I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, it was really fun. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on episode 10. Thank you, Dr. Ann Kelley, for breaking down so many timely topics, from the power of secure relating to managing connections in a turbulent world. Ann's perspective on staying grounded and the importance of mentorship was especially valuable. It's refreshing to hear someone talk about navigating social dynamics with authenticity and understanding. Be sure to check out Ann's book, Secure Relating, Holding Your Own in an Insecure World, and her podcast, Therapist Uncensored, available wherever you get your podcasts. Both are great guides for anyone looking to strengthen both personal and professional relationships. Please take a minute to leave us a review and share Uncharted with your friends. Word of mouth goes a long way. If you're Gen Z and would like to ask questions to our guests, visit our website at foundingup.com or check out the show notes. And as always, keep pushing forward, stay curious, and don't be afraid to explore the uncharted.